Hi, everyone. We're here tonight joined by Chris Schmidt, class of '07, who's at Amazon in business intelligence arena. And I'm going to ask Chris to give us a quick profile.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Schmidt. I'm as Jeff mentioned, class of '07. I was an international politics and economics major. And I've done a few things in my time after Middlebury, but I now am a senior manager of business intelligence for Amazon. And specifically, I work in the grocery divisions, working on the Amazon Fresh grocery brand and also doing work with selling groceries across greater Amazon and Whole Foods.
So, Chris, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about what you do? What is the role? What are the types of issues, questions, analytics that you're dealing with in the role? And then we'll kind of take it from there.
Okay. Yeah. So my role is kind of twofold. One, I'm a manager, and at Amazon and in many companies, management as a function has its own responsibilities. So I'm responsible for uh, hiring and developing a team of talented data professionals, ranging from business analysts to business intelligence engineers, data engineers, and product managers, technical program managers. And my main function for the business, in addition to kind of managing my and growing my team, is to basically help the business to get the data and insights they need to do their jobs. So I support all, all the business units who are operating different functions of a grocery business. We operate shoppable grocery stores. We also operate fulfillment centers that do grocery delivery and pickup that you can order on Amazon.com, but then get delivered to your home, or you can pick up from a store or location. And within the business, there are many things that teams need. Um, and so we see it really as not just doing analytics, which we consider to be kind of the last mile in kind of Amazon speak. We're a supply chain transportation business. So the last mile of the data value chain you could think of as taking the data, doing some analysis, and making some decisions. And it's definitely part of what we do, but that's just kind of the last mile of the value chain as we think of it. We also do just building data, so sourcing data from the various systems that produce them, which could be just our order processing system, our supply chain systems, and building data sets based off of them that can be used by data teams, but also business people. We're a very data oriented company. So many of our customers are actually very data savvy themselves. Many of whom can write uh, data extraction languages like SQL. And so our job is to make data available to them, and then to also build tools for them to use. So those could be dashboards. People are familiar perhaps with, you know, companies such as like Tableau, that is a well known for having data visualization dashboards. We have our own internal visualization dashboarding tools. There's also a lot of web applications that serve data, and the purpose is really just to make sure, again, that people have the data and insights they need to do their jobs, which could be anything from people are deciding what selection of grocery we're going to offer to customers. Where are we going to put our stores? How much demand are we going to plan for over the course of a year? And grocery is very seasonal. Where are we going to, how are we going to do our launching of new stores? So on and so forth. There's a lot of different business questions. And the fun part is being able to be kind of involved in the whole range at different parts of the value chain and in terms of data. Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So, one of the big initiatives we've had over the past year is related to grocery subscription. So, we run a delivery pickup business, and that is a value added service that we offer. Many other companies offer it as well too, who sell groceries. And as part of that program, we realized that we had to have as many companies do, have to have a delivery fee. Um, most people don't want to have to pay delivery fees. So the idea was, well, why don't we have, and this was not a new idea, but Amazon's extremely good at capitalizing on good ideas that are out there in the market, is having a subscription program. And so the subscription program allows a customer to pay a flat fee per year or a monthly fee. And for that, basically get unlimited delivery and pickup of groceries, as well as some other perks. Um, and so, as part of that, there's a lot of questions that had to be answered in terms of um, what is going to be the price that we're going to offer the subscription for, which a lot, involved a lot of analysis about what ordering patterns look like and what was available in the market, what were customer expectations and needs, ranging from, well, where are we going to test this as a program, and what are our metrics of success going to be? How do we have to make sure that when we're preparing for this initiative, that we have enough capacity to support? You don't want to launch some big new program and turns out nobody can go order groceries. And so these are just examples of things, but in that process, we're talking to business leaders who are making these decisions every day, who own different aspects of different programs and are responsible for different aspects of the customer experience or the operations to deliver that experience. And in that, we could be doing actual analyses. So we get a very specific question like, what should the free shipping threshold be that we offer? Like, how much do customers need to order before they can get that free delivery? Well, I need some reports and dashboards to know how this service is performing in my store I'm operating. And how did it compare to before and after this program? So, and then all the data sets that are go behind it have a lot of different applications. So now we're talking about a membership data set that could be used for many different things, not just within my business, but across businesses in Amazon. Like there's an entire team who's responsible for the Prime subscription service overall, and they're very invested in these types of subscription services that are considered add-ons to the core program. And so in that way, it's plugged into many different aspects, and we could be involved in that final analysis, making some of the decisions that I mentioned, but also in just building infrastructure that can allow people to ask their own questions over time and get answers that can help them do their jobs.
Talk a little bit about the kind of skills and attributes of the people that are on your team. You just what are some of those things? And in particular, if I'm an undergraduate and I'm thinking, boy, this sounds interesting, and I'd really like to find my way into this business intelligence capacity within an organization.
Yeah.
What do I really need to know, and what do I need to do to kind of maybe set myself up for success?
Yeah. So there are some core technical skills that are required to be successful. And then there's some more kind of intangible skills, softer skills that are required as well. So on the technical side, um, working in data analytics is really getting comfortable with the tools that allow you to, as we think of it, like extracting data, building data, transforming data, processing data, and analyzing data. And all of that requires some pretty common things people have probably heard of. So SQL is search query language, and that is basically how you pull data out of any system. It not only allows you to pull it out, but to manipulate it in certain ways that then you can use it. So think about, you know, uh, taking some raw, orders of, customers ordering groceries and everything that they put into their grocery order and every event they took to build those. And now you want to build it into a data set that's basically like, well, how many items were in the order and how is the total value and when did they place it and where did it go to? Things that will be useful to other other activities you want to take with that data. So that's all, SQL, as well as some scripting or kind of object-oriented programming languages. Python is a very popular and prevalent one. And those are learning skills that, you can learn today. There's free resources everywhere that are very good. It's a very good time if you want to learn these skills. You can learn them, and highly recommend them. Very useful and practical, no matter what job you go into. Having these skills are really useful, but they're definitely very critical for our function. Then on the softer skill side, like business intelligence and in Amazon, but I think um, in the greater sense of companies who are using data, and which companies don't, is you really have to understand how where data and business problems and customer needs intersect. And what that means is we ask questions a lot of like candidates, for example, about like, tell me about a time you used data or made a metric to influence a change in your business or in your domain. And what that effectively means is like, what needs to change? What's important? What do we care about? Why do we care about it? You have to know these things if you want to build good data to answer those questions and solve those problems. And that I think you can learn in many different places. I did not start in a data function. I worked for a small nonprofit that was doing microfinance loans. And but I did a lot of Excel work. We had a lot of questions that required data. And later I worked at a bank. And I wasn't doing a data function, but I did a lot of data work and learned a lot actually about data in that process. But I also really learned about like what are the problems that we're trying to solve in these spaces. And for that, like the thing I would think about as someone looking for an entry level job just coming out of undergrad at Middlebury is what companies are very data oriented. Man, all companies use data, but some are very oriented around guiding everything they do with data. And I think those are the companies to look for. You don't have to come into like an analytics function right away, but if you are in one, or if you're in that kind of company, those opportunities will be everywhere. So you'll have that opportunity to really use data to answer those business problems. And that's something you can sell to any company looking for a data function, that as long as you can show the technical skills and demonstrate that you know how to use data to drive change in a business, they will be very interested in you, even, at an entry level. I think that would be the best way to get into this industry.
Okay, cool. So you mentioned it. Why don't you take us back in time? You had done an internship uh, while at Mid, and then you moved in the banking sector. So just talk us through what was kind of rattling around in your mind at the time in terms of getting
Mm,
the experiences. So start with the internship,
yeah.
and just talk about how that maybe set you up for the next step in terms of the full time after graduation.
Yeah. So um, I would say at the time, I didn't have a lot rattling around in my brain, to be quite honest with you. And I think that's okay. I want to say that is okay. You probably think you've got a lot going rattling around your brain, and in fact you do. But looking back, you're like, oh man, I had no idea. So that's kind of how I feel now. But I did know that I was an IP&E major. I was very interested in, IP&E. I think really cultivates and a curiosity for systems. How do systems work? And how do systems, at least in the case of what I ended up being interested in was build these kind of financial um, infrastructure to support growth and development internationally. I was just very interested in that as an idea. I was learning about it. Microfinance was something that was becoming a buzzword at the time, and so I was reading about it in like The Economist, and so I was like, I'm really interested in this space. I found And I had no idea. There were a lot of small companies. There was one that I grew up outside of Chicago. There was this nonprofit that was involved in microfinance. I just kind of cold called them and, was curious about opportunities. They had a little internship program, unpaid. I took it. And I learned a lot. I wrote like a white paper to get some funding for a program in Ghana. And I was always working out of an office. I didn't get any like field experience, which would have been pretty cool and exciting, but I learned a lot. And the interesting thing though is like when I got to the end, I was still very much interested in microfinance, but my boss, my manager, told me like basically dissuaded me from continuing. Um, Maybe not entirely, but what he said was, you have two options. He's like, I would recommend if you want to stay here, you either go into the field. So like go to one of the countries where we are deploying our services, learn on the ground there and how our services work, and then come back, and then you can work back in this kind of function with that knowledge. Or go to basically a company that has, a big company that has the training programs and the skills investment that will allow you to become more well-rounded, because you'll learn a lot there, and then you can take those skills back here and benefit what we do. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. And I thought about the field work. And ultimately, probably for more personal reasons, again, not a lot rattling around my brain, was thinking about my friends and my girlfriend at the time. But I decided to go the company route. I worked for Bank of America. Again, I was not on the ball with the internships with the big banks. So if you're interested in that, get ahead of the curve. You need, otherwise you'll miss the boat. I did, but you can still find a role. I found a role in an obscure part of the bank called trade finance, and it's basically like a very old part of the bank where it's like things you may or may not know, letters of credit. Now it's like supply chain financing, but it's basically like how banks like guarantee and support trade flows across the world. Actually, very relevant to IP&E, which is kind of why I was like interested in it. But very old part of the bank, and not the most intriguing part for most entry level, job seekers. So I didn't have a dense field of competition looking for this role. But just as these things go, I learned a lot, and I actually did a lot of data work. And one thing banks are very good at is scale. So they got lots of systems that vend all kinds of information. What they're not great at is like making it being very innovative, with how they work with data. So I was doing a lot of manual work, like getting company names to line up in Excel using macros and, scripts and stuff like that. And, I hated it at that part of the job at the time. But, then that got me really interested, one, in physical supply chain. And then because I was doing basically what I consider to be financial supply chain, watching this money move across, companies across the globe, and be like, oh, that's really interesting. I'd love to know more about the physical supply chain space. Maybe I'll be a supply chain practitioner. And so I was looking for, a change in companies that did physical supply chain. I was like, Amazon, they're like one of the biggest supply chain companies in the world that also sells tons of products. And I just thought that was interesting, um, and applied for a job as a business analyst here. And I actually was trying to apply to a physical supply chain job in Amazon, but as can happen if you apply to Amazon, they'll say, not that, but what about a job as a business analyst for Kindle, which is their digital books division? Very interesting place to work at that time. Very like Kindle was very big. It still is, but at the time was newer. And I decided to take it, and then kind of the rest is history. But I would say in that, I didn't have a very clear idea of like getting to where I am now. Actually, it wasn't even really an idea at all. But every choice kind of led me on this path where I realized that the things I was doing in the job I was interested in at the time was actually getting me closer and closer to this domain that I actually found the most compelling to me. Now you can shortcut your way into that versus I took this meandering path, but you can still get there.
Um, Chris, as you sit here today, having gotten all of the knowledge that you've gotten and the experiences, what would you tell your younger self in terms of advice? from a career perspective? What would you say?
I would have been a little bit, I think I would have been a little bit more adventurous in some of the options, I think. Um, because I think, looking back, was like, well, I have to do this and I have to do that. Um, and I think I could have taken some different opportunities along the way. So what I would suggest is, what I would tell my younger self is, um, you know, figure out what's a space that you just have a lot of questions about, and you keep going to that space, and just find people in your network that you can keep talking to that about that over time, um, to keep playing to that interest. Like there were points in my, like I spent probably way too long at the bank, um, for example, that I don't regret it, but at the same time, I knew earlier that I had different curiosities and interests that I wasn't really following, and obviously you should have fun. So like, don't do this endlessly at the expense of enjoying your life, especially as a young person. Um, but like, don't be afraid to like do something different, that might not be as exciting early on, because you have no idea where you'll end up at the end of it. But like the curiosity is something that you need to like cultivate like as much as you can, as early as you can, and just like be okay to let it take you where you want, no matter where you think like the long term prospects are for you, in terms of like where you thought you would end up, or wanting to achieve a certain level of like status or compensation, or being in a certain location, any number of things that could be priorities. Because like you won't really know, and all those things will change like what matters to you over time. But like that curiosity like could have led you into certain places where, even in the data space, I kind of think like I'm pretty sure I would have ended up here, but I had opportunities where I could have done interesting things in that space much earlier on. Like for example, like I was extremely interested in language models very like early on when I heard about them, and I was really interested in language in general. As part of IP&E, you take a language, and I was just really fascinated by that. I could have pulled on that thread, and I wish I did, but I was like, oh, it's kind of interesting, and I like stayed in touch with it. But I'm like, oh man, I could have gone and worked at an institute, or a company that was early on in that space, and not for like even like lucrative kind of thinking, could have had a great opportunity financially, but more just like I would have loved to have been more involved and learned more and been of that space earlier on, and I didn't. So, you won't know what that thing is until it's happened, but your opportunity to just pull on that curiosity, you'll have like immediately, and you should do that. I wish I
Super,
had done.
super. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw it open to any questions. So if anyone has questions, just go ahead and you can turn on your camera and ask away. Alex.
Hi, hi Chris. Good to meet you. Hi Jeff. My name is Alex. I'm a sophomore right now in Middlebury. I study computer science. And something I'm curious about would be see where the company is going much better than I can see where it's going. How do you see hiring changing over the next few years? So are they still going to hire developers given all the AI things that's going on, or are they going to
Mm.
hire more data scientists? So what insights would you have about the job market within Amazon?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a very common question, I think, that many people are thinking about and asking. I've been, I, I could say that, in right now, our engineer demand is not going down. It's not going away. Um, in fact, I think as an engineer, you have a kind of a special sense for how like AI can function in software products, as well as data products if you are in data, and that makes you very capable of leveraging this technology to do very amazing things. And they're going to look for people who have that instinct. Now, on the other hand, I would say if somebody is just a pure coder, right? Like they're just like, I just know how to write the functions to do the thing, right? I do think that will be in less demand because you'll have, these systems, these tools being able to do that very effectively. But what will always be in demand is what is at that intersection for how to apply that. And so I would say that, like, as somebody who's interested in this space and will be a job seeker, that think about how you can really lean into that part where you understand that intersection and how the application layers work. And if you do that, I think, there are going to be, very good jobs for a very long time with that function. Without having a kind of a perfect, perspective on what that'll be, I'm sure that that is going to be the case. And I would not be concerned about anyone who is pursuing this. I think it will set you up for great success.
Now, if there's still time, about the interview process you went through. So, for applying for internships when you're applying big tech, because there's just so much competition, you get asked these absurd questions like, how many golf balls fit in a plane? Or if you're shrank and you put in a mixer and the mixer is about to spin, what do you do? So I suppose that's just to filter all the competition and see how you think. But as you got into Amazon at a higher, bigger stage of your career, were you asked these kinds of brain teasers? And do you think that the interview process changes a lot by seniority? Yeah, seniority that
Yeah,
you.
I'm actually a bar raiser at Amazon, which means that I lead interview loops. I do a lot of interviews. I have like over 500 interviews I've conducted at Amazon at this point. I help the company make hiring decisions, and we never ask those questions. Those kinds of questions. Everything is based on our kind of leadership principle model. We're asking very experiential questions. We're asking, tell me how you demonstrated effectively this leadership principle. I talked about kind of one in the beginning about how did you build some data to affect some change in your business? Why was it needed? Like, how do you know is the right thing to do? We want to like see your thought process, but we want you to talk about some lived experience of how you did that. It's very kind of part of like what Amazon calls its peculiar ways. So not every company is like that, but I think that many companies aren't in that kind of case or brain teaser. I personally would never want to work somewhere where like the gatekeeping was based on a brain teaser. I couldn't do it to begin with, but I wouldn't be interested in that kind of place anyways. But I think there's many companies that don't. So, like it might be a little disappointing if that's the gate and you're like, don't like that or don't feel confident in it. But, you know, many excellent companies do not ask those kinds of questions. You can prep for them, but I would say definitely in our case, it's really about, and what I would say for, most companies at the end of the day, they just want to like know that you can think through how to solve a problem and you understand the risks and you understand trade-offs to make and you understand how to communicate change and concerns with stakeholders and leaders and things of that nature. They want to hear about that and how you'd work through it and how you did and have. So that's where I would be most focused on. And, if you end up getting a case, doing the best you can.
Well, Chris, thanks very
Yeah.
much for spending the time. I'm going to bring the session to a close. And obviously, interested students can find you, Chris,
Cool.
and ask you some more questions from a networking standpoint. So thanks very much.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. Take care.